So everyone, thank you for tuning in to another video on my channel, or if you are listening in on the Best Damn Camp where this will be released as well. Thank you also for tuning in, but listening in this case. Obviously, if you are on YouTube, you are ahead of everyone on this situation because you can see that I am not alone. I am joined by a fantastic guest that you may recognize from previous conversations here on the channel, and just the fact that he's a big YouTuber and, subscribe to his YouTube channel and all that sort of good stuff. But we're not here to talk about YouTube this time around. Instead, we are here to talk about books. In particular, his incredible fantasy series and the many of them that there are. And if you don't recognize who I may be talking about now, don't worry, I'm about to let you know because I have the incredible Antoine Bandele here on the channel and the podcast to talk about his books. Antoine, thank you so much for coming to speak with me.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody in the Best Damn Camp world out there.
So tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you do, some of your work and all that sort of good stuff.
So my name is Antoine. I do lots of things. Like literally, I do lots of things. I do YouTube still primarily. Can I still say primarily right now? Well, really, no. Last month, what overtook it was audiobooks, which I also do. That stemmed from my publishing, which I also do as well. So like I write books, I edit them as well. What happened with the whole thing with the book thing? So I was publishing back in 2017. In 2019, I did a co-authorship with another author for a novella. And with that, like all my stories, I automatically do audiobooks for them because I have the ability, because I've been doing multimedia for like the past 15 years, mostly new media like YouTube and the likes, with different YouTube channels and vlogs and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh, I could do audiobooks myself. Like, let me just like find some actors because I live in Los Angeles and I had my previous job, which was at Apple. There's a lot of people, especially when you are in any kind of job in Los Angeles, there's going to be people there who are probably in the industry in some form. So I just said, hey guys, like, you guys want to come in and like, record some audiobooks? And then the co-author that I was with was like, yo, you should be doing this as a service. And I was like, okay, cool. I think I'll try that. So this last month, this is the reason why I had the whole spiel about like, I did audiobooks for full time since last month, sort of a thing. And now it's on par or overtaking my YouTube stuff. But yes, publishing is what I do primarily now, whether that is audiobook production or publishing my own works or publishing with others.
All right, awesome. Just hearing it, I'm just like, I'm told all the time that I do so many things. And I'm like, have you guys met Antoine? I don't do that many things. Meet
I
Antoine.
say the same thing about other people all the time. People are like, you do too many things. I'm like, I don't do enough. I feel like I'm extremely lazy, guys.
Oh God, I feel like that's such a creative thing as well. Just like, no, I should be doing more things.
More,
like,
yeah.
I still have
I'm
time
not
to
doing
sleep.
enough.
If you still have time to sleep, you have time to do more things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel I should do a preface here. Do get normal hours of sleep. Don't follow in this pattern of not sleeping that much because you'll end up like me with the bags and all that. Don't do it. Don't do it. But just to kind of dive in, especially in regards to some of your books. So your most recent publication is the first in a 5-book series named TJ Young
Or
and
6.
the
I'm
Orishas.
not quite
Or
sure
6?
yet. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know quite
Okay.
yet. I don't know.
Okay. 5 or 6 with multiple mini short stories as well alongside, which are all just as
Right.
amazing. So lots of content, and it's very exciting. But so TJ Young and the Orishas, which is a YA fantasy series following the life of teenager TJ Young, a non-magical boy in a gifted magical family, and all the things that follow. You're right there, mate.
This is a bad version because it's like the early copy, but just so I can have like the cover in there.
Oh
Oh, you
yeah,
have a better
hold on, I'll
version. You
bring
probably
this
have the
in as
better
well.
version. Oh, there you go. You have
There
the
we
fine
go.
version. There you go.
There we go, everyone.
Stuff around me. I mean, I do have the real stuff, but I have to walk away to go get that.
But yeah, so with that, what kind of inspired the story of TJ Young and all the other things that will follow with it, and sort of how planned out at the moment is the series as a whole?
So it stemmed mostly from what I was doing already with my more adult stuff. And when I say adult, I'm not talking about like erotica. I'm talking about like adult as in it's just not young adult, it's for, adults, like 20 and up kind of stuff, right? I had done it because I think I had watched in 2016, I think like season 6 or whatever of Game of Thrones had ended. I just like literally just went on Google and I was like, "Oh, I want like an African Game of Thrones." Like, and then I saw Marlon James said he was writing one. It was the Red Wolf, Black Leopard. I can't remember if that's the name of the book title or not, but that wasn't really like my vibe. Like when I read that, it was very like obtuse and very hard. It was very accessible to me. But then I found some other ones too, like Akata Witch from Nadia Korafor, and then NK Genesis 5th season, which I did enjoy. But again, they weren't really like exactly the book I was looking for. And as seems to be the case with most writers, is that the reason we start writing is because we just want to read the book that does not exist out there for us. And that's what I just did. So I spent a year doing African mythology research and just African history in general, starting with like world history, Africa, and then like getting more like detailed with certain kinds of people groups, like the Kimbundu people, which is where the Kishi myth comes from, which is what my debut novel was about the Kishi mythology. And then I moved on to the Sky Pirate Chronicle stuff, and that one's more like an influence of like both East African, Caribbean, and a bit of Arabia mythology influence of that. And then I moved on to contemporary because while I was writing, and I've always had the idea of going contemporary, I just didn't know when I was going to do it. And I always had the idea of doing it with the Orishas, which is the West African faith system in which they believe that there's a pantheon that manifest themselves through nature usually. So Shango for thunder, Oya for like storms, Olokun for the deep blue sea, Yamoja for the top of the ocean. And because I was kind of wanting to do contemporary at that time, because it was really actually difficult for me to write some of the other stories because it was a little bit more like archaic, or like there's certain things I just couldn't do. And in writing TJ, it was so much easier for me to flow in terms of my prose and my language, and just felt way more closer to my own voice. That it called to me like in particular. But in terms of like inspiration, I call it my holy trinity, and that trinity is Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Degrassi. Most people know the first two because I mean they're the mega successful series, but most people don't really know so much about Degrassi as much because it's like a Canadian soap opera teen show. But what I liked so much about that is that the teenagers in that always felt real, even though they weren't like doing what real teenagers do, like the full-on cursing or the full-on like shenanigans that go on with teens. It still felt more authentic than what I was getting at that time. Even their slogan for their show was called Degrassi, It Goes There. And it really did. Like it talked about like, stuff like teen pregnancy and like abortions and like, drug use and abusive households, domestic stuff like that. Now I don't go that deep into it with the TJ stuff, but I did want to touch on some of those aspects while still having like the fantasy element. Because one critique I have of Harry Potter is that the kids don't really act like teenagers up until like the 6th book, and really that was just like kind of surface level. And that was kind of like taking me just a little bit. And also with like Percy Jackson, he's dealing with the Greek gods, and I wanted to have something that was related more to my own ancestral line, which was the West African peoples of Nigeria and Benin, the Yoruba people, and that is the catalyst for why I wrote TJ.
All right, awesome. Honestly, I think we've talked about this a little bit on your Discord server and just a few previous conversations, but every time I hear more about the stuff that inspired you to tell this story and just kind of sort of the personal connection to it as well, it always kind of adds this extra depth whenever I read the book. So like obviously I've got my copy, and obviously I was beta reading and like editing and stuff for it when it was first done. I've read it 3 times since in this completed
Oh my goodness. Oh my God.
It's such a fascinating read, and just learning more and more about like your connection to it just kind of adds this like extra level of depth to the story. Like I know you have in the opening section, this is it, to my Yoruba family, I will follow you home. Like I've been listening to it on the audiobook and everything, and it's just so beautiful every time I hear it.
So that has a double meaning to it, because my last name literally means born away from home. But Bandele is apparently either like a mistranslation or just a different interpretation when it came over to the States, because the actual origin term for it is Bamidele, different from Bandele, Bamidele, which means follow me home. And when I found that out, because I think, what was this, maybe like 3 years ago when I was a camp counselor at a local summer camp here, there was a time we did Olympics, and then I chose Nigeria, and then they're like, okay, now you have to learn some, like how to say, I think 1 through 10, hello, goodbye, like, you know, some phrases or whatever, so you can teach the kids. Like, so I was like, okay, so let me ask my friends, who, by the way, let's shout outs to Adeola and Arias, who were actually the catalyst for me even knowing that the Orishas existed several years ago. I think this might have been like 7 years ago, because like I said, I'm multimedia, so I did a lot of projects with a lot of filmmakers, and at that time they needed an editor for their fantasy short film that they were doing that was actually filmed in Nigeria. And it was about these things called the Orishas. And I was like, what the heck is this stuff? Like, what's going on? And that's how I became aware of it. And I lost my train of thought. How did I start talking about this?
Your last name.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I went back to them because they had moved back from Nigeria back to Los Angeles. And they're the mother of Adeola, Arias, is like my friend, because we went to the same high school, but then he married the Nigerian woman. Her mother was in town at that time, and I was like, oh, cool, let me like learn some, like, you know, Yoruba from her. And she taught me some stuff, and then I told her about my last name. She's like, oh yeah, it's really supposed to be like Bamidele, which means like follow me home. So that opening that you just read for the dedication has double meaning, because it's follow me home, because I am the idea is that, you know, with the story, I'm like, you know, kind of going back and learning about, like, you know, where my people came from, and, you know, who they were about and what things were important to them. But also it's also my last name.
Okay, I feel like you mentioned this, but now saying it again, I'm like, either way, even if I have heard it before, it's just still so cool at the same time. Just like the dedication, having that connection to your name and the meaning behind it. It's just, and I feel like it connects to the story at the same time, like just that phrasing, like everything about the story just feels like personal, and just I've got to say, to everyone watching and listening, I don't want to, like, obviously I'm going to talk more about it because we're doing an interview to do with the books and stuff like that, but the prose in TJ Young is so fucking amazing that literally I can't get over it. Just like, your writing style is absolutely incredible.
You're not the only one, because I have a proofreader who is basically one of my friend's moms. She's a second grade, third grade teacher, elementary school teacher of some sort. And I knew this was going to happen at some point. Hold on, let me get the other light turned on. The other light isn't as pretty as this one, as you can see, but it's gonna have to do. It's my fault, guys. I did not like charge my like little light before I came here. But yeah, so she had been reading all my books, like, you know, up until this point. And then she immediately said, like, when I came, because usually I give her like a physical copy, because she's very much a physical copy. So like when we exchange, we like usually talk about it. She's like, yo, like this one was like your most confident, like your prose was like the most confident I've ever seen your prose before. And I totally agree with her, because it really did flow for me.
And you can definitely tell. And I think even with like listening to it with the audiobook as well, just like getting it in so many different ways, both reading it on the page and hearing it as well, it's just such a different experience. And I know obviously you edited the audiobook for obviously your own book with TJ Young,
right?
And it's just, oh my god, I love the background sort of sounds that are going with like a lot of the different chapters, because it just adds to the sort of like ambiance of it. Like you can picture it like a film in your head with that background music too, the narrator reading along with what's going on in the scene. It's brilliant.
That's actually something I got from Star Wars novels, because again, going back to YouTube, like a lot of my YouTube channel has like Star Wars material. Particularly, I was doing something called the Versus series, where I pit like, you know, two people together and who wins. And in doing that, sometimes I would go back and like listen to the audiobooks to like refamiliarize myself with some of the characters that I was dealing with. And Star Wars audiobooks are very unique in that they are still conventional in that it is someone just reading. There's no audio drama, like, you know, a full cast or anything like that. But then, you know, they have all this license of Star Wars material, which includes sound effects and music. And what they did that I thought was very effective, but also didn't intrude, because as I started doing audiobooks, I realized that audiobook listeners do not particularly like when there's a lot of little doodads of sound effects in the middle of the reading. But what they seemed to be okay with were those interludes. So I was like, okay, so to heighten the production a little bit, but not for one, it helps because I don't have to edit as much, because like I don't have to like put little sound effects in every little moment. But also it just helps because if you're just having those interludes, it signals a scene break or it signals a chapter break. But also it just gives you the idea of like the swamp you're hearing, or like the school playground that you're hearing for just a little bit at the beginning, and then it trails off, and then the rest is just taken away by the voice actress. By the way, shout out to Nakia Renee, who did the narration for the audiobook. She's getting a lot of praise, by the way. Like NetGalley, I'm usually afraid of NetGalley because they'll like slam you, but like this is the first time I've ever had like NetGalley people like give me like praise, and it's mostly due to her, because most times the people are like, Nakia did such a bomb job, which she did. But yeah, I got that from Star Wars novels, who they do that, where they'll have like, you know, a little bit of Star Wars music, but then most of it is just clean narration.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Oh, it's just amazing. So I highly recommend for anyone who prefers audiobooks. It's amazing. But kind of going on from that, and like you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but with your series obviously exploring the world of the Orishas, which obviously deities of the Yoruba people, like you mentioned, what is it kind of like writing a YA fantasy series that explores a still practiced religion? And I know you mentioned in like at the start that obviously this is a fantasy telling, like it's not all going to be completely accurate. But how did you kind of make sure that you were being, in a sense, respectful of the faith? And how did you feel about, was there like a sense of pressure that came with it, or was it kind of chill to a sense? That was not the best phrasing, but hopefully that makes sense.
So for me, like the mission statement was always, I gonna be honest, I don't really care about the how can I say it? I guess like the canon of that, because again, like I was saying, it's fantasy, right? But what I do care about, and then what I wanted to get right, was making sure that their traits were correct, because obviously they're in a world that is separate from our own, and it's a fantasy world that's like, you know, has a separate entire timeline than our own. But the thing that I did not want to get wrong, where their personality traits, like what kind of offerings that, you know, they're supposed to have within the faith system, you know, where they came from, their names, the spellings of their names, all that sort of stuff. Like I didn't go so far as like Marvel, where you see them kind of like take the extreme liberties. I even had a friend recently who actually came to me like saying that he was going to use Eshu in his work. And he specifically, he described it to me, and then like Eshu was not like, did not sound like the same person, or I mean, sorry, not the person, but the same entity that I was familiar with, or I am familiar with as I've been studying. And he's like, oh no, I'm doing like the Marvel method. I'm just kind of like, you know, taking the name and like shooting. I was like, I'm not like that specifically, just so you can know the gauge. I'm specifically not trying to do that. But still being open so that they fit within my story, this fictional place that I'm making. But I want to make sure that if someone does read it, they can get the gist of what they are at their core. So that if there's like a personality trait that they determine from Eshu, for instance, they can actually read the real Pataki being the sacred texts that are in the faith system, and realize, oh, that's the same thing that I read from that guy's book. You know, I want to keep that, even though like the storyline that you might get from that Pataki might be different. At least the character types are all the same. So yeah, that's like my main thing, is just to ensure that the traits are completely in line, if not necessarily the storylines of how they got to those points. For example, as you said, my short stories, like when Eshu goes to meet Obatala in the Sky Realm. There's no Sky Realm. There's no meeting of Obatala in some prism room or stuff like that. But their personalities and the things that, you know, like the story about the drinking with Obatala, or Eshu being kind of like this trickster, or the gatekeeper, like all of that is all in line. But like the actual conversations they had, and like, you know, the settings are, you know, fantasy and fictional.
All right, awesome. Yes, I just remember I was I was maybe reading the book again today. So that's when I saw this thing at the start. So it just made me think of it as a question, because I know obviously there's like lots of different books, and I know this is the case with like Percy Jackson, for example, where a lot of liberties are taken in relation to the Greek gods. So it's always a question that I always think and kind of wonder about. Obviously, there's like the Rick Riordan Presents imprint, where so many different mythologies are kind of being discussed and shown there. And there's always a sort of question as to how close they are being to the original mythology, what sort of liberties have been taken. So to know that you've kind of taken enough within reason, but kept the personalities and just kind of who the gods are as gods. I was going to say people, but no, that doesn't make sense.
Right, that's the same thing I did too. Which is funny because with the Orishas, they are many of them are deified humans, like actual human. Like Duduwa was a very celebrated ruler of the Oya Empire, either Oya or Ifa. I think Ila Ife was the city that he presided over, but I think not Oya, Oyo Empire was the one that he ruled over, and then he became deified as like Oduduwa, the Orisha.
Oh, no way. Okay, that's pretty cool. Oh my God, I'm learning much. But it's always interesting to know just like the thought process that comes behind, especially in relation to like mythologies and also, but like faiths that are obviously still being studied and practiced like in nowadays. But I guess kind of in regards to that, obviously to kind of move on to a different series in this case. So alongside TJ, you are also working still on the Sky Pirate series, which I'll just show to everyone here on YouTube, just the copy of the first
that
book
is
that I have.
currently on hold because TJ is like so like in line with what I want to do. But yeah, prior to that, I was doing the Essawan series, which is like the overall like the world, and that one is a completely different world universe. Like TJ takes place on Earth. It's just like a hidden magic system sort of thing going on there. S1 is a completely like fabricated world, which is based on African myth, and even I have a world map which isn't built yet because I'm still building out region per region as I write like each of those books in that series. But essentially, it's the same shape overall as Africa, and each section is based on some sort of like African region but reimagined. Like I was saying before, like I mixed like East Asian and Arabic and Caribbean like in like one section, and then I had like Southwest Africa with the Kishi in like one area, and I had this idea for I want to do a Northern Africa Mali Empire thing at some point with that series. So that series I have a bunch like ready to go for that. I have this really cool one fairies and love potions, and it's like basically J-Lo's Hustlers but like in a fantasy setting. Like I have a lot that I want to do with that series, just that it's just not the vibe right now. Like I'm into like the contemporary at the moment.
No, I totally hear you. And it's interesting to kind of hear about like these different worlds that you got going on, and also just with the fact that you as an author kind of know when you need to kind of not like step back, but also kind of step back from something that you kind of not feeling for to focus on something that's bringing you. I thought, what's that? The thing? It's like it's TJ is sparking joy, whereas the Sky
like
Pirate
creative fulfillment.
Not as much. Yeah.
Sky Pirate was starting to feel restrictive to me. I was starting to feel like restricted. And yeah, like TJ was totally like the thing that I needed. And I'm gonna like that. Even like I spoke to my editor about making that decision. I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna like put Sky Pirate on hold until I finish TJ, and then I'll move back to it. She's like, I think that's a brilliant idea.
Well, it's always good to hear that like other people are supporting the decisions behind it, but it's also good to know that you kind of know as well when you kind of need to take a step back from something, just kind of for your own benefit. Of like the TJ Young series is making you happier in a sense, and so you want to focus on that and get the enjoyment and the happiness and the sparking of joy from that series, and then maybe eventually sort that whole thing of like when you're not feeling something, you step back, work on something else, and then maybe eventually that sort of feeling will come back for that one because you've been away from it for a while. But yeah, just it's really cool. I don't know what it is. I'm kind of like, even though we talk pretty much like all the time on like your Discord server and all that sort of stuff, hearing more of you talking about your books and your series and like how you feel about all of that, it's just really surreal in some way.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, like especially when people ask me, and that's the reason why I have so many discussions, like if it's with my editors or critique partners or anything like that. It's always better for me to not just like speak to them via like text or like via like a Google Doc, but like in person. Like so many times Callan, who is like our editor for something else we're doing, which we could talk about, by the way, if you want to talk about that thing.
Is that okay?
Because you brought up Rick Riordan Present, so like we could probably talk about that. Yeah. But yeah,
in my head I was like, I'll sneak that in.
Our editor, sometimes I'll like say I have a block, I need a session, and I'll just like we'll open up and I'll start talking, and he'll ask me like maybe one or two questions, and I will just go off and like just be talking to myself about, oh, this could happen with that, and then, oh yeah, I wanted to fit that in because of that. And just the act of speaking and verbalizing all of that, versus being stuck in my head and like even because even sometimes people say like, oh, vomit onto the page, but even sometimes that doesn't work, because like vomiting on the page is a different thought process than when you're like actually having to talk to someone and actually explain things that you're like, there's times where he said one or two things in the entire conversation and I just talked for 30 minutes and I'm like, thank you, I think I figured it out. And he's like, I did absolutely nothing. Like, I can't do his British accent, but he has like his own British accent thing they did.
I got it. I did absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And then I'll like go away and then like, I like finish out that chapter or scene, whatever it is. But yeah, it always helps to do that. But yeah, speaking on that, yeah, so we have a joint editor in Callan, because as you mentioned earlier, Rick Riordan Presents has all these other mythology that's happening beyond Greek and Egyptian and Roman. However, the difference is that they are not interconnected. They're just like their own standalone places. And knowing that, and also being a big fan of like the Marvel, like, the new MCU system that started out in 2008. And with the Incredible Hulk, I think, something like that. Can't remember what the first one was. Incredible Hulk or Iron Man
was technically the first of the MCU, and then Hulk was beforehand. But yeah, that's not important. I don't know why I'm like correct. It's like, yes, no.
But even just beyond that, because comic books were doing that for years already. Like they already were interconnecting and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, oh, what if and even the idea we were saying about like all these different pantheons, and I thought, well, I've always been fascinated, especially because I'm a big fan of Final Fantasy, and in that work, they're always mixing and matching mythology all the time, left and right. You'll see Shiva as a summon, and then you have Bahamut, and then you'll have like Yojimbo. Like you'll have you'll have Japanese mythology, and then you have Hindi, you have European myth, like, and they just like mix and smash, And I was really fascinated about that. So I was really interested in a shared world, especially even in the book, the first book that you read with TJ. I make hints that there are other things going out there beyond just that one thing that we're looking at in this story. And I've always been interested in shared worlds in general. So I guess this is like a Fran exclusive, because I haven't said this to anyone publicly yet, but there is something in the works currently where there is a shared universe between TJ Young and the Orishas and other mythologies and worlds out there that we have going on, and Fran is going to be one of the first authors who's working on a book in that shared universe.
Did cross by accident. I was like, fingers crossed. No, it's happening. So thumbs up. That's amazing.
I mean, your story is far enough along that I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure she's gonna finish it. So now I can say it, because before it was like, I don't know. People always say they have the ideas and they want to do this and that, but they don't actually execute. But yeah, I think we're at a good point now. So
yeah. Oh my god, I just realized this is actually technically like a full-on exclusive.
Yeah,
like
no,
I've been
sure.
keeping it secret and just like tight-lipped, and like I've been mentioning. So I do like writing vlogs on my channel as well. I'd be saying, so I've got a YA fantasy that I'm working on with people, but I can't say anything.
Multiple people.
With multiple people. We've had some meetings. It's going well. So now officially I can say things. And also another thing. So I've quit my job to kind of focus on this and some other things for writing as well. So like
for a year, you said, right?
Yeah, for a good, so end of 2023. No, not end of 2023. It's not 2022, Fran. We're in 2021.
I know. Still 2021. Too far to be.
So end of 2022 is, if nothing's kind of progressed, then I'll go back to work. But until then, nothing, just writing for a year and a bit. But this definitely like sparked the decision like further of like, this is amazing. Yes. Goodbye job. But yeah, honestly, from things like that, and the fact that you had like this sort of ingenious aspect of like having that sort of inspiration from MCU and like the Rick Riordan Presents, and kind of combining them in a sense and kind of going beyond what's previously been done. It's
beyond just the idea of like I guess the technical aspect of it being like, oh, it's like an interesting idea. It's beyond that too, because I think it plays into what I'm always trying to not necessarily preach, but like tell people that like we are way more connected than we are divided, and especially when we were even talking in our earlier meetings about like all of our different mythologies that we would be working with and how they're. I even did a thing with I think it was called not Virtuous Con, it was called a Corn Con a few months back, where I was in a panel with a bunch of other authors who write in different kinds of mythology. And then when they're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a very similar one that I have in mind. And someone's like, oh yeah, and we also have that same thing here. And I'm just like, yeah, like humanity is way more close, and all these very isolated individual people groups that came up with these ideas, and how similar and how interconnected it is. And I don't feel like we have that enough. Like sometimes we always are like, this is my group, this is my team, like, you know, very tribalistic in that mentality. But really there's so much more similar, and I wanted to show this shared world to show, like, you know, more concretely like how similar all this stuff is and how they could all live among with each other.
There's not like that sort of like competitive aspect. I feel like that's the thing, like you see in like Percy Jackson, for example, like Heroes of Olympus is all Greeks versus Romans, where I'm like, but you guys are the same, just like
I know, it's just one nation took the other one and kind of renamed people and stuff like that, you know.
But it's a completely fascinating thing. I just remember when you mentioned it to me, I was just like, oh my god, this is goddamn brilliant. Oh my, how has no one done this before? But I'm so glad that Antoine is the person doing it first.
And then it's indie too, so like it's very open, you know, and what we can achieve and what we can do. Which by the way, I'm super excited for the person that you said that you possibly can get, and I'm like really jazzed.
They may be. I'm going to send them this actually, so that they'll definitely be listening, because I'm going to send them this when this goes live and be like, just so you know, there's a little hint in here for you. But yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating project, and I'm glad that I technically have the exclusive here. Way,
yeah.
But I guess kind of going back to like to TJ Young and the Orishas in particular. So you've mentioned in previous interviews, and you kind of mentioned slightly here, that this is a 6 main books with the mini stories set to be published, obviously indie published as well, across the many years to come. What can you sort of tell us about what to expect with this series as it moves forward?
What do I expect from it? I don't know if I have like, I don't, generally speaking, when people ask me this kind of question, I usually don't make expectations for like my projects. And I know some people are like for instance, my marketing lady consultant, she's always like, oh, what are your, make sure you like list goals so you know exactly what I'm like, I don't really do that. I just kind of like put my head down, like do the work, and then like, you know, watch the results. And then also I try to put good practices like as a foundation, you know, in terms of like, you know, making sure that I'm writing somewhat to market so I can know like what's actually selling out there, or make sure like betas, you know, and things like that, like knowing like what kind of feedback I need to like look into. But other than that, in terms of like making sure that my foundation is very solid, I don't really think about what will be achieved until the things are achieved and things happen with it, and that sort of a thing. And that's always kind of how I've been, even with like, you know, going back to the audiobook stuff that I was doing, like, you know, I just kind of put my hand down and did my work on that one. And then I got like the whole, the thing with that Big Five publisher that's having me do like audiobooks for them now. And it's like, yeah, like, you know, it's always sort of worked out for me like that, even with like, you know, YouTube, like doing YouTube videos, like just put my head down and do it. And then like eventually, like some of those people were like, oh, how did you discover to do like that video? It's like, well, because I have the interest in it and I just like did it. And then like it popped off, it kind of a thing, versus like me like trying to like find a particular niche and like, you know, like milk it or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's probably bad for like those like business minded like organizers, but I don't have plans like that. I just work.
I just work and then just see what happens.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the best way for, I guess, kind of in regards to that, like, what do you kind of, I guess it's sort of the same question, but also kind of, what do you kind of hope for your readers to kind of get from this series? Like when someone opens TJ Young, what do you kind of want?
Oh, well, yes. So I'm writing basically for 15-year-old Antoine, which is crazy because there was a young reader who, because I had put my like the early reader arcs in like a Facebook group for mostly for Black nerds and stuff like that. And so there was a mom in there who gave it to her son, and her son said like this was his favorite book like in years, and I'm now his like favorite author. And I sent him like a book box with like, like a bookmarks and like stickers and artwork for the TJ stuff. But and then seeing him opening it, because I heard about this kid, but never like actually saw him on video. I'm like, this kid looks like TJ. Like he literally looks like TJ. Like down, not even just like physically, like with the hair and everything and his face, but like even like the clothes he was wearing. Like he was wearing like the same sort of like, I mean, all nothing but love, but like the dorky clothes that like TJ would wear, like just like really basic t-shirt and like, like some jeans, like not he's not a stylish kind of guy, right? And that was me, like, growing up too. And I saw that kid and I was like, oh snap, like that's really what I get most out of it when I see people interacting with the story and getting out of it what I put into it. And actively like that communication, like, oh, what was the thing that Stephen King said, like that we basically as writers have the ability of like, was it telepathy, or I can't remember what he said in on writing, but he made like the idea that it's very magical, like you inserting your words and stories and then having that implanted in someone else's mind, and then them having that same experience. I think is just like pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome. And from obviously the sound of it, it's already worked in a sense, like it has had that response from people, but I hope it continues for the rest of the series as a whole and all of the other books that you release throughout your life. Like I remember you mentioned on the Discord that you're only 31, and I'm like, you've accomplished so much and you're only 31. That just feels like
I should have started much sooner. I spent like all my 20s basically not writing, and I should have, because like all my instructors and like mentors and things like that always told me that I should be writing, and I just never actually did it until like age 28 or something like that. Like,
well, you've clearly hit your groove at this point now, so that oh god, what's the phrase, the saying, not good things come to those who wait. That wouldn't make sense. There's a saying of time,
some proverb.
Yeah, some kind of proverb, or I don't know. You wouldn't think I'm a writer myself. I just what a
You know
words.
what? That's funny too, because people think that you can come up with stuff like off top, which some writers can do. But those basically are stand-up comics. Because who are storytellers? So if you ever like look at a really good stand-up comic, they are the storytellers. But like I don't come up with good stuff at the start, and I think most writers don't come up with good stuff at the start. Like we spend many moons slaving over words, and most of them are bad until we make them decent.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. But I guess kind of like for the last sort of question to sort of finish up with all this. So obviously you mentioned that you are an indie author, that everything you publish is indie. For any possible indie authors out there and listening or watching, what sort of advice would you offer them about getting into this side of the industry?
I always send people to like my another holy trinity I have, and that would be Joanna Penn. She's the grandmother of indie publishing. Like if you aren't listening to her or like the things that she's been doing for like the past 10 years, you got to change that. Joanna Penn, that's Penn with a double N. Then would be Mark Dawson. Mark Dawson is another very big indie author. He's a thriller author. I think he's even got like 2 of his things like optioned right now at like NBC or something like that.
Wow.
He's a 7-figure author. Was previously publishing traditionally, and then went indie, and he's even turned down like 7-figure deals because he realizes that he's making that in 1 year. If he just signs that away, then it's like, oh well, there's that $1 million gone. You know what I mean? Super great guy. More business oriented, I would say, than craft or thinking about writing. But very good if you're going to be indie, because you do need to be a little bit business minded to make it sustainable. And then would be Jenna Moresi, who is a YouTuber. I don't know if you would consider her a booktuber. Right tuber? Is there like a right tuber?
Author tuber, I think is
author,
the name.
author tuber, I think as you would call her.
Yeah.
She's really cool if you want someone who's like really down to earth and not afraid to have like a very potty mouth in describing things about the industry. But she's a really like accessible, I think, version of all these other like kind of mentors. But those are the 3. Like those are the ones that I started with. I started with Sean Platt and Johnny B. Truan's podcast, the self-publishing podcast, and then I kind of branch out to these other people. But those are the main three that I find like I get the most out of. But yeah, anytime anybody asks me, I'm like, just follow these people. They know things much better than I do.
All right, awesome. So for everyone watching, listening, I'll make sure to list all these guys' things in the episode show notes or description box, so you can check them out if you want to be an indie author or just an author in general. Because I've seen some of Jen and Moressi's and all of their work actually. And
Shaylin, right? She's really cool for that too.
Yeah, Shaylin. She's predominantly on Reedsy, I think, as well, like the Reedsy channel. Lots of videos
they picked her up, I think, like a year and a half ago or something like that, 2 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I just remember it just popped up everywhere, and I was just like, oh, I know you from your channel, and now you're on Reedsy. Nice.
Yeah. Sometimes I get confused too because she'll post on her channel still, and I'm like, oh wait, this isn't Reedsy, you know.
Yeah, that does make me chuckle. Sometimes, like, I don't realize I'm on their channel, and then I'm on
or her channel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm like, which
vice
one?
versa.
Which one? Oh, it doesn't matter
because it's the same exact setting with her bookshelf in the back. You know.
Yeah. They're both good. It's fine. Either works. But yeah, Anton, thank you so much for coming and speak with me about TJ and your work and all the incredible stuff that you are doing, as well as the exclusive on the multi-universe mythology works.
Yes. Which we'll probably talk about more as like that develops more.
Definitely. And maybe I'll have to bring you back on to talk about that as well on the channel in the future for further exclusives. But yeah, honestly, let everyone who's watching, listening, know where to find you and how they can support you and your writing and all the stuff that you say. I'll make sure it is linked down
the
below.
best way would be AntoineBandele.com. That's AntoineBandele.com. That has literally everything you'll need to find about me, like social media, the books, the audiobook services, the formatting services, the podcast services, like all the stuff that I do. So there, AntoineBandele.com. You'll find everything.
Okay, well, that was quick and simple. So amazing. So to everyone watching and listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this video/episode. It has been amazing as always, and thank you all for your support. Be sure to check out all my socials and Antoine's and all that stuff in the description box /episode show notes, and be sure to come back for the next video and or episode if you're listening in on the podcast. Whatever day, they're on different for YouTube and the podcast, so just subscribe. That's basically where I'm going with. Subscribe and tell your friends, and be sure to order now if you haven't already TJ Young and the Orishas book 1, The Gatekeepers stuff, and basically all of Antoine's other books as well.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
There are so many
shorts and novellas and all that.
There are so many. I'm like, oh, I could only bring out 2 with me, but I have all the others as well. So they're worth the purchase, is what I'm saying. And also, indie authors deserve your money. Buy books or order to your library, whatever.
That's the thing too. People don't realize that you can go to libraries. We get paid through libraries. Please just order from libraries. Do it, please.
And libraries are amazing. So go to a library.
Yes, please do it. Please
support your local. Thank you. We love you. Bye.
Bye. What a try.